Last week I discussed the most important and controversial change that's coming to the 2025 ESV. That was Genesis 3:16. And I judged that most of the complaints about the rendering of that verse were coming from the left. This week we'll discuss the change in Revelation 13:8. And regarding this verse, I judged that most of the complaints of about the ESV rendering are coming from the right. I think both left and right were wrong to freak out. I think it's clearly wrong, even ridiculous, to call the ESV a complementarian Bible or a Calvinist Bible, but the internet persists in doing both. I hope they'll stop. I hope Bible-believing Christians will trust the ESV in increasing numbers. This, in fact, is what I observe to be already happening. It is my feeling that if the King James only world, for example, ever does move on from the King James, the ESV is their most likely choice. It's the one I hear them mention most often as being on their study shelves. It's the one they often assume I favor, and they're kind of right. It's not a big step away from the King James. That's one reason I like it. In fact, I want to argue that the ESV is nothing more than a conservative revision of a revision of a revision of the King James, and that it does what all evangelical English Bible translations do. It picks among available interpretive options, when there are options, those that are consistent with the conservative and evangelical viewpoint of the translators. I think this sort of thing happens fairly little and only rarely in controversial passages, and I think this sort of thing is 100% normal and unavoidable. It is the character of this channel to attempt to answer patiently charges that are clearly wrong, even ridiculous. So come on into the Blackburn Gardens flower drying shed, my wife's pride and joy, and let's begin our discussion of Revelation 13:8. If, in general, most of the complaints about Genesis 3:16 in the ESV came from the left, then, in general, most of the complaints about Revelation 13:8 have come from the right. In my experience, that is. As with Genesis 3:16, so with Revelation 13:8. I do not believe that the ESV translators caved to pressure or did anything illegitimate, as we'll see. In fact, the ESV translators didn't actually make this verse less Calvinistic than their revision. Instead of arguing that they did, I want to show that their rendering was never clearly Calvinistic in the first place. Here's the verse, Revelation 13:8, which speaks of the inhabitants of the earth in the future worshiping the beast. This is how the verse has been translated in every version of the ESV since 2001. All who dwell on the earth will worship it, that is, the beast. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of the life of the Lamb who was slain. Here's how the verse will read in the 2025 ESV, and I predict for all time. All who dwell on earth will worship it, the beast, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. Let me underline that I do not know the internal heart motivations of the ESV translators. I can't avoid some guessing at motives, but I do not speak from some kind of privileged position inside their internal councils. What I do know is that the persistent criticism of the ESV from the IFB King James Only world that took much of my focus for 5 years on this channel up until the end of 2024 is that it is a Calvinist Bible, and that the IFB is not alone in making this charge. People in the more Arminian or at least non-Calvinist side of things tend to say this online. And when they are asked for evidence, this verse comes up. They don't always give evidence for their charge that the ESV is Calvinistic, but when they do, this verse, in my experience, gets thrown into the mix. Why? It's because the King James Version and a lot of other translations go a different direction on a key inspired ambiguity in the Greek that I'm about to explain. Now, I'm done engaging directly with King James onlyism on this channel, but that does not mean I'm unable to talk about the King James. I love the King James. I find it to be responsible and trustworthy. But at Revelation 13:8, I do find their choice to be mildly inferior to that of the ESV translators. And here it is. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. In the King James, that phrase, from the foundation of the world, is taken to describe the slaying of the Lamb. Not the Lamb himself, but the slaying of the Lamb. Now, this is grammatically possible. There are two options for how to read this phrase in Greek. This phrase could be taken to modify the slaying of the Lamb or the writing of the names in the book of life. Let me read the verse very literally from the Greek in order to put these options on display. By the way, there is basically one minor textual variant in this verse. That collects a few different words, but it's irrelevant to this video because it makes no difference to the meaning of the sentence. And they will worship him, all the ones who dwell on the earth, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Now, English simply does not function like Hebrew and Greek. As with Psalm 12, if you saw my lengthy video on that passage, so with Revelation 13:8. We have a genuine ambiguity in the Greek. The phrase in closest proximity to the phrase from the foundation of the world is the Lamb slain. As in English, so in Greek and Hebrew, that proximity leans the interpreter towards seeing that phrase as modifying the slaying of the Lamb. But word order is just more flexible in Hebrew and Greek because both languages have some tools that English lacks to communicate what modifies what. In this case, however, we don't have grammatical gender, for example, to help us. We're stuck with two tools, proximity and meaning. I have said that proximity points toward the King James rendering of this phrase, but not meaning. Consider an English example. What if you heard or read, "My grandfather is a distinctive-looking man with a shock of wild white hair standing about 5 feet tall"? Proximity tells you that it's the hair that's standing 5 feet tall. Experience in the real world, however, is telling you that it's the grandpa who is 5 feet tall. Grandfathers who are 5 feet tall may be uncommon, but they are far, far more common than grandfathers who have 5 feet of white hair standing atop their heads. Change "my grandpa" to "that circus performer," and maybe you have a perfect ambiguity. But if you keep grandpa as the subject of the sentence, meaning points decisively to the grandfather as being 5 feet tall, and it beats proximity. Likewise, it's not impossible that John was saying that the Lamb was slain before the foundation of the world. But it seems rather unlikely, doesn't it? We've got no other biblical hints that this could be the case. And it's rather difficult to explain what it would mean, right? Is it only an artful way of saying that God always planned to send the Son to die for human sin? This could be an elaboration of what's often called in theology supralapsarianism. In other words, God responded to the fall of man before it happened. Again, this is not impossible, right? But it's theologically awkward, maybe a little difficult. Meaning, I think, points in the opposite direction then from proximity. I commonly check 23 translations of the New Testament in Logos, which is the sponsor of this video, by the way, and I've almost never seen them all split this evenly. The score was 12-11 in favor of the ESV rendering and against the King James rendering. And there is no apparent theological bias that I could discern leading the translations one way or the other. Translations across the spectrum, from literal to not so literal, and from conservative to maybe not quite so conservative or evangelical, are split. Here they all are. Going with the King James option are the Latin Vulgate, Tyndale, Geneva, New King James, Modern English Version, New International Version, today's New International Version, the New Living Translation, the Revised English Bible, and the International Standard Version, which I only just started checking a little while ago. Going with the ESV option are the Revised Standard Version, NASB, Legacy Standard Bible, CSB, HCSB, the Net Bible, the Common English Bible, which is somewhat more mainline Protestant, the New English Bible, the New Revised Standard Version, the Tree of Life Version, which is a Messianic Jewish translation, and the New American Bible, Revised Edition, which is a Catholic translation. And take note, the ESV not only takes the same option as the RSV, it uses precisely the same wording as the RSV, so it did not introduce Calvinist bias here. If there is Calvinist bias here, it came from the RSV, and I don't know anyone who has said that the RSV had Calvinist bias, or the NRSV for that matter, or the CEB, or certainly the Catholic New American Bible. There is one significant difference between the two lists of Bible translations that I just gave you. All of the older ones side with the King James Version, or I should say all of the older ones, including the King James, side with the Latin Vulgate. That's what I think is really going on here. I have observed deference to the Latin Vulgate countless times in older Bible translations. The Latin Vulgate was the King James Version of the past, the time-tested, accepted default translation. What I don't think that you can or should say is that the English Standard Version manifests a Calvinist bias here. Not when major English translations, even those that are clearly not done by Calvinists, are so evenly split. Not when the grammar of the passage in the Greek is so perfectly ambiguous by the inspiration of God. Just a quick note about Logos, the Bible study app. You see the kind of work I do on this channel, and Logos is the best tool for the job. I want my viewers to have this tool because my work is all about making the Bible and Bible study as accessible as possible to the plowboy. Now, you're probably not a plowboy. You're higher up the educational ladder. Many of you are teachers yourselves. You need the tools in Logos, and the new AI tools that I'm subscribed to now have made it even more useful in ways that I never previously imagined. It's pretty simple. I'm especially liking the summarizing power of AI to give me a hint as to whether I should go look at a particular source or not, and the searching power of AI to give me relevant results. But most of the time in Logos, I'm just looking at Bible texts and translations, studying Bible words, and looking in commentaries. There simply is no better tool that I'm aware of for doing these things. And if you want to try doing Bible study the way I and so many other Bible students and teachers recommend, and if you want to try it for free up to 60 days, visit logos.com/wordonwords or click the link in the description, and you will get an exclusive extended free trial of Logos, and you'll help support my channel at the same time. That's logos.com/wordonwords. And at the end of this month, I hope to drop the first video in what will be a course called Bible Tech 401 that talks through all the tools that I use, the tech tools, to do Bible study and research. And Logos will be the very first tool I talk about. It'll get a whole video, but actually it'll be something of a beginner approach. And the very first video, the one on Logos, will be made freely available to the entire internet that wants to watch it. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. I went to the trouble this time of checking foreign language translations too. Here are the statistics. The Dutch Bibles I have are 5-2 in favor of the Vulgate's choice, along with the King James, of course. The Spanish Bibles I have are 6-2 in favor of the ESV's choice. The Italian Bibles I have are 2-1 in favor of the Vulgate's choice. The French Bibles I have are 4-1 in favor of the ESV's choice. The Portuguese Bibles I have are 4-1 in favor of the Vulgate's choice. I'll stop there, though I most certainly could go on, especially if I knew languages outside of Romance and European languages, with a tally of 16 in favor of the Vulgate and 14 in favor of the ESV. Here's the upshot. No matter what translation you grew up using or trust now, it is certain that there are many Christian believers around the world who have grown up reading and trusting one that says something different than yours says at Revelation 13:8. Are you okay with that? You should be, because this is the natural result of the situation that our good God gave us when He chose to make the Bible important for sanctification, but chose at the same time not to inspire any translators for any language, let alone for every tribe, people, tongue, and nation. Of course, the ESV translators were not directly addressing the ambiguity that I've been focusing on. They assumed their interpretation of that ambiguity and merely updated Revelation 13:8 to read probably a tiny bit more literally and in line with Revelation 17:8, a point which I have saved till near the end of the video, but which now has to be fed into our exegetical calculus. Read along with me. Some of the phrasing is going to sound familiar. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. There is no ambiguity here in Revelation 17:8. These earth dwellers' names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. From the foundation of the world has to modify written in this case. The King James and the Vulgate both agree with the ESV here at Revelation 17:8. And this cross-reference is a huge reason, the huge reason, to go with the ESV's rendering in Revelation 13:8. At the end of the day, we have a very minor revision of the ESV here that touches on a passage of some controversy without actually, as best I can tell, being adjusted because of that controversy. Both renderings in the ESV mean the same thing. Indeed, I don't see a significant difference between having names of elect written down in the book of life before the foundation of the world versus from the foundation of the world. Certainly not from the perspective of the ESV's critics on the right or the left who say it's Calvinistic. I wish both left-wing and right-wing evangelicals would take 2 chill pills and call me in the morning. Or if they can't swallow that, There's a chill liquid they have now at the Walmart pharmacy. Just dispense 15 milliliters and drink it all down. Several of the times when people on the left have insisted to me that such and such passage in the ESV demonstrates beyond doubt that the English Standard Version's translators were patriarchalist shills, I've looked at the passage in the RSV and found that the ESV did not change it. And when people on the right or the left complain that such and such passage in the ESV demonstrates beyond doubt that the ESV translators were Calvinist shills, they frequently demonstrate that they don't have a grasp of the small but legitimate range of options afforded by the Greek or Hebrew in that place. But look at what happened in this case. The push on the left and the pull on the right ended up giving us an ESV that tacked back toward the safety of the literal in the two passages which we have so far examined. Genesis 3:16 last week and Revelation 13:8 this week. The title of this video raises a bigger question than I could really answer in one video. Revelation 13:8 is not the only reason that the ESV's opponents tag it with the label Calvinist. It's not even the biggest reason. The biggest reasons are that so many Calvinists were involved in producing it, that it came to prominence at the same time as the Young Restless Reformed movement or New Calvinism, and that so many prominent Calvinists have used it and endorsed it, such as Kevin DeYoung and John Piper. But when I look into the specific charges against the ESV, the concrete passages in which it's commonly said to have a Calvinistic bias, I commonly have trouble even figuring out what the complaint is. And I commonly come to the end of my study concluding something very like I did today. The ESV took a now standard, surely grammatically possible interpretation of a given verse, one that matches multiple other translations in multiple languages, including translations that had nothing to do with the Young Restless Reform movement, like the RSV. Maybe there is a Juan Pipero in Mexico who is a Reformed leader, but I doubt that he was able to insinuate himself into the Biblia del Peregrino Catholic translation of 1993. Nonetheless, it agrees with the ESV at Revelation 13:8. Believe me, non-Calvinists have ways of reading Revelation 13:8, and 17:8 for that matter, in line with their theology. In my experience, they usually just say that, well, God looked forward down the halls of time and he knew who would believe in him. I don't find this reasoning persuasive, but a lot of Christians do. And it appears to me that they're going to continue to do so until the eschaton, when I hope and presume that Christ will shove aside any pretended vicars and tell us directly what he meant at any places of uncertainty. Until then, I actually take comfort as a Christian and as an evangelist that God knows those who are his. I don't have access to that book, but I have confidence that my name has been written there from the foundation of the world, because I have seen the grace of God granting me repentance and growing spiritual fruit despite my sinful heart. I also have confidence that literally any non-Christian to whom I give the gospel could have his or her name written in that book. Whosoever will may come. And I might be one of God's means of giving new life to that person. Far from seeing such a passage as a reason not to evangelize, I see it as a reason to pray, meet people, and tell them about Jesus. To be fair, I have taken up only one specific charge that the ESV is Calvinistic, and I wasn't even able to find a specific example, after repeated searches, of an ESV critic even mentioning Revelation 13:8. I admit to going from memory of past criticisms that I've seen online. Most people who bother to do more than make a passing comment on social media about the alleged Calvinistic bias of the ESV actually end up pointing to the ESV Study Bible, not to the ESV itself. But if you have heard other ESV passages get used to make this charge, I would be interested in hearing about it. I'm sure some of my viewers have heard this. I might do another video. The ESV is a careful, straightforward, conservative translation of the Bible, done very much in line with the King James tradition, of which it is an excellent representative. It is worthy of your trust, the ESV is, as I hope to show in at least one more video tackling the latest round of ESV revisions. Next week, John 1:18.